right out of the gate, we said, let's talk to that new restaurant owner that just opened a restaurant. Let's talk to that person like building a new asset. Let's talk to that artist with a new exhibition at a gallery, because there are cool things going on in the city. The TV news can cover the car crashes. Like, we don't need to do that.
It just isn't popular to kind of be positive and to be supportive of developers and, a lot of the stuff that you're doing. Why do you take that approach?
I think out of the gate with Columbus Underground, again, 20 something years ago, when you looked at local news, and I'm going to pick on like local TV news. And I think this is true, not just Columbus, this is every city. Local TV news, before you go to bed, it's crime, car crashes, sports, weather. You go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
How good is it for like the mentality of a city for the last thing you see before you go to bed at night is the 10 p.m. news, and it's death and sports and weather.
Mm-hmm.
Like you come across feeling like just everything sucks all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So right out of the gate, we said, let's talk to that new restaurant owner that just opened a restaurant. Let's talk to that person like building a new asset. Let's talk to that artist with a new exhibition at a gallery, because there are cool things going on in the city. The TV news can cover the car crashes. Like, we don't need to do that. So if there are issues, that need addressed, we should address them. But if you ambulance chase, if you just go down that rabbit hole of like the constant negativity, I think we all just feel worse off because of it. I think that's the genesis of where that whole thing kind of started.
Mm-hmm.
But like we were kind of talking about before we got started, like I think a lot of the problems, not just in Columbus, but in America, are with systems. There's systemic problems that need changed and addressed.
Yeah.
It's really easy to just beat up on the people within those systems as like a scapegoat because you want like an easy answer. You want a punching bag.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's easy to look at a developer and say, oh, your apartments are too expensive. You're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, maybe the economy is the problem. Maybe inflation is a part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the fact that in America, housing is a commodity and not a human right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But those are just really heady, like big picture things that a lot of individuals can't feel like they have an impact on a day-to-day basis, or it's too big of a boulder to push to make a big change like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much easier just to get on Facebook and scream and yell and pretend that just one individual is the source of all evil.
Yeah. It is much easier. I think people don't even realize that, though. It's just like all they can see. They just can't see it another way. How do you deal with kind of the haters? I generally stopped looking at comments mostly just because I didn't have time to do it.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was not something I wanted to spend time on.
Yeah.
We generally got a lot of support. And I for a while would jump in and engage with people, especially people that, were unhappy, just because, once there's like a person in the room, so to speak, it seems to calm the conversation.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, I'm sure you get some hate here and there. How do you deal with that?
Trial and error over the years, like I used to engage with everyone on everything, for quite a while. And you kind of start to see the patterns of someone who has a legitimate concern that they want addressed, or some actual negative feedback that they want heard, versus someone who is just complaining because they want to pick a fight, and you realize like, oh, that person is, they're poking at the beehive because they
get juice out of that.
Yeah.
There's something in it for them.
Yeah. And so we kind of realized like, oh, that person, they're having a bad day. I kind of mentally took a step back and realized like most of the people in those realms, like they have their own problems. It's not my problem. It's their problem.
Right.
I'm not going to take any kind of ownership over their problem. They're just projecting it upon me or our business or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I generally just ignore it and move on pretty quickly.
Well, that's good. What do you see as you look at the city? And, it is interesting just to hear you talk about kind of the things that you're covering. When you think about transportation, you think about housing, you think about food, the arts, and you've seen, a lot of change. The last decade in Columbus has been filled with change.
I took a photo as I walked up here today, here at Gravity in Franklinton. I took a photo while standing kind of out by the trees down there, the plastic trees, and looking across at the new development. I took a photo and I shared it with some friends in a Discord. And someone's like, "Where is this? I have no frame of reference."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "It's Franklinton." They're like, "Holy crap." Yeah. If you don't, if you're not down here every day, I mean, you see it every day. So it probably feels like it's taken forever.
Yeah.
But to someone else, they're like, that changed that much in 5 years, 10 years. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. So, and so what do you think about the change? Honestly, what's going well? What's not?
I mean, I think overall it's positive. In the grand scope of history, and when you look at the alternative to urban development is suburban sprawl. So if we didn't have what was going on in Franklinton now, this would still just be a lot of parking lots and old buildings that aren't really being as utilized, and we'd still just be bulldozing cornfields even further and further and further out. There are concerns with gentrification, displacement, rents rising, all kinds of other things that need to be addressed. And I think we're doing an okay job on some things, and a lot of things we need to do a lot better job of. But the alternative, I always say, whenever we post a story about development, someone's like gentrification. I'm like, well, what's the alternative? Should a poor neighborhood stay poor? Is that an answer? My wife and I, we live in the King Lincoln district on the Near East Side. It's historically an African-American community. We bought a house when we were 27 because it was dirt cheap, and we were, poor 20 somethings, and it's what we could afford at the time. But we kind of see ourselves as like, if we want to move in here and be sort of good stewards to this historic property, get to know our neighbors, help our neighbors with things, we all exchange phone numbers and help each other with various things, and just be a part of this community, then, at the end of the day, we're going to feel good about that. We were concerned, early, we're like a young white couple, so we look like the face of gentrification. We're breeders, we're having children, but we're putting our kids in Columbus City schools. We're involved in neighborhood groups. We try and, pull weeds from the sidewalks and stuff like that, when we can do that sort of stuff. But like, what's the alternative? Should we have just moved to Dublin and not thought about inner city problems and out of sight, out of mind? Like, I don't know. I think it irks me a lot of times when someone throws out gentrification as like a Molotov grenade, new development happening, gentrification. Right. It's like, well, but what? Yeah. Like, what's your solution? What, pointing out a problem is a lot different than coming up with a solution to the problem. And so for me, that's where it starts to get really interesting, is when people are willing to have like more nuanced conversations of like what we should actually be doing individually and as a society to change some of these systemic problems.
Yeah, I think the affordability one is a one that, there's a lot of varying opinions, and just being in the business of housing, I think the approach is sort of counterintuitive, which would be like more of a basic economic supply and demand thing that, actually what needs to happen and we were talking about this as it pertains to Tuttle, like this is super unpopular, but it is just my belief that really what we probably would be most effective, even though you explain why, it's not the answer for all kinds of reasons. What would be most effective is if we incentivize the hell out of market rate development and flooded the market with inventory and consequently kept the supply and demand at a point where rents wouldn't be rising as fast as they are. Right. Now, that's not going to solve like affordability for all people. Right. But it's certainly like what we're doing by removing the incentives is making everything more expensive.
Sure. Yeah. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that all development in all areas across the entire country have been subsidized for the past 100 years. People love to complain about housing subsidies or any tax abatements for a new urban development. But it's like we built the highways to accommodate sprawl. Every piece of public infrastructure, whether it's road, telephone lines, sewer, new parks, the new fire departments we have to build further and further out. Like that is subsidizing sprawl. We are spreading ourselves super thin, and people aren't moving further and further out because, 100% like it's their choice. Like we have invested money into making that more possible and more affordable for those people who choose to do that.
Right.
So recognizing that the entire system, has problems all the way across the board, and not just, this developer's getting a 15-year tax abatement for this project downtown. Like, that's not the whole story.
No. And I think, just to stick on that point for a minute, what I think we should be doing is incentivizing housing that is also thinking about solving problems beyond just, fattening the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's, just where we're passionate, is whenever we get money, it's either to make the deal work to begin with, because it doesn't work. Or let's spend it on things that are going to be additive.
Right.
Which it comes back to that kind of culture piece, which I think, is something we could do a better job of. We should incentivize projects that are going to include art and be additive to the culture of the community.
Well, and it's great too. I think you guys have always done a great job with this, and some other developers and builders, do the same, where the contributions in terms of amenities go more to the neighborhood than internal. Like having Roosevelt, on Broad Street open to the public. Whereas if this were a property, out in the suburbs, it would be sort of like an internal coffee shop just for the residents, and it's not really contributing anything to the non-residents of that specific community. So I think that sort of stuff's important. But the one thing that's gotten me really excited right now is the upcoming changes to the zoning code for the city as a whole that Aaron Prosser is working on with the city. There's a lot of cities, this is like super nerdy stuff, but a lot of cities around the country, they're starting to eliminate single family housing zoning laws, antiquated laws. A lot of them are based in racism, put in place, 100 years ago, to really kind of help open those floodgates to where, if I own a piece of property and I want to build a garage with a housing unit on top, you're not allowed, and if you want to do that, it's, a year's worth of paperwork and, all of the money that goes into filing that paperwork and jumping through those hurdles. And if you can just eliminate that and make it so, I could just build this extra unit, then I've just doubled the density of my property and allowing, one more unit. You don't have to build skyscrapers to do that.
Right.
We can add a lot of missing middle housing if we change the rule set.
Yeah. So
I'm excited that we're looking into that as a city right now.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Let's talk about some other parts of the city.
Sure.
A food, I think, is one where maybe just in like recent, I don't know, year or two, which is hard to believe based on what we've just come out of with COVID and everything. But it seems like we are starting to see some new restaurants pop up. To me, it feels like we could do a much better job of that. It's not an easy thing to do, but I'm just kind of curious to hear your perspective on food and kind of where we're at and where we've come from and maybe where we're going.
As someone who likes to eat, or as someone who's kind of watching the industry and what changes need to be made?
Both. I mean, what do you love? And also, how are we doing as a city, and what do we need to do better?
I think the really cool and interesting thing is that the food options have grown more diverse across a wider variety of neighborhoods. I think, 50 years ago, like if you wanted, to go out to eat, you went downtown, you went, somewhere along High Street, there were a couple little options within the suburbs. And the focus, I don't think is quite as concentrated. There are interesting places to find, not just like Franklinton or Old Town East or Marion Village, the things that are like a little bit further off the beaten path, but the amount of amazing ethnic food that people are willing to go out and try in places like Somali restaurants, like on the Northeast side, like along Morse Road or Cleveland Avenue, all the food trucks, obviously all the taco trucks, with the Latino community out on the West Side. I think more and more people are willing to go out of their comfort zone and try some of those things, and then bring them back into the different neighborhoods. So I think that's really one thing that's changed a lot over the past 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the common complaints that you hear is people say, "Oh, we're too like Cameron Mitchell heavy," and I'm wondering. If Cameron's building an ecosystem that eventually, has people breaking out and doing their own things, or what does it take for us to see more quality operators with, it's a tough business, right? So you not only why Cameron's been so successful is because they know how to make good food, but they also really understand the business side of things. Yeah. And that seems to be tough.
They get all the details right. Yeah. From start to finish. And I've always heard that they take really, really, really good care of their people. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with Cameron Mitchell's stuff. It is what it is. And I think in a big city, you're going to have from top to bottom, you need the little dive bars and the food carts on the side of the road, and you need the fine dining, high end sort of stuff. But I mean, like Chapman's has been knocking it out of the park. Yeah. The past couple of years, they got written up. What was it? New York Times?
I didn't see that, but I know
like a year ago, they were named like one of the top 50 new restaurants in America. Yeah. And like, it's hard to get reservations there now, like on a Saturday.
It's like annoyingly impossible. It's kind of one of the things that I'm, it's bittersweet. It's like, well, cool. Columbus has got some great new restaurants, and you can't get into them anymore.
My cousin came to town a couple of weeks ago, and him and his wife, and we were going to go out to eat, and it was relatively, like 3 days notice. Yeah. But I looked at Chapman's, and it said the first available table for 4 was like 8:45 p.m. Like, that's too late to eat. Yeah. So I looked at Commune, same thing. Yeah. We ended up going to Understory, the Commons at Understory, to eat up there because he didn't need a reservation, but. And we had a great time, but it's nice that there are that many different options, because he was like, we haven't been to Columbus in a year. What's new? Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, everything.
Any gems that, diamonds in the rough that maybe people don't know as much about that you love?
Well, it's not a food thing, but I kind of mentioned it a little bit in passing. The attic on the Near East Side is like my new favorite spot. Yeah. It's a 10-minute walk from our house. It's a comedy club. Yeah. It's above the Mikey's Late Night Slice there. Yeah. Great, like local comedians, fun vibes. I think they're really kind of building something cool there. Yeah. Which is great. And it's not far, Gamut is over there, which is a great spot. The Oracle's a fun spot a couple blocks away. Yeah. So I like some of those little off the beaten path kind of things. We're going out to Fire next week, which we've been to. It's the new restaurant inside the Hilton. Yeah, I haven't been yet, but it's really impressive. There, if you go, there's a menu item just called the tomato. Okay, it's like $9. It's like it's a shareable. It's like a small plate or something. Yeah. But I don't even know what they do. Like they braise this tomato and then they finish it on. They have this like giant fire oven and they finish it on that with like a honey glaze and goat cheese and caramelized onions. All right. And you're like, wow, this is the best tomato I've ever had in my entire life. Yeah.